Alaska really is different. You either love it or you hate it. You can't have any casual love affairs with Alaska.
When I first arrived here, I hated the place, but you couldn't pry me out of here now.
And the people are friendly. That's the best part about it. It's just like back home.
One thing that can be a problem is the wife being cooped up. Her husband's able to get out and enjoy the Southeast Alaska, but she has to stay home. This has created quite a problem with some of the families in here.
In Alaska, things are a little bit unique in that to travel to and from your work, you usually have to go by plane or boat. And I've made a number of trips up here by air, and I'll tell you one thing, it's sure the pits. Takes a special kind of attitude to live in Alaska. That's it. It's the attitude.
Alaska. It's big, bold, and breathtaking. But not everyone sees Alaska the same way. To those who have never been here, Alaska is an exciting and adventurous last frontier of the mind. But to Alaskans, the idea that Alaska is a wilderness where fortunes can be easily made is a myth. If you are considering the Alaska region for employment, it's important that you know the difference between the myth and the reality before you come. Living conditions in Alaska are different, and newcomers don't always understand the real facts about working and living here. Some newcomers adjust with ease. Others find adjusting to their new homes difficult. And why? Because being a Cheechako or newcomer doesn't make it easier. A lot of people who come to Alaska find something quite different than they expected. We talked to Norm House and his family, and they were no exception. Yet they each found some special satisfaction in the last frontier.
I'm with the wrestling team, and when we travel like to different towns to wrestle and that sort of thing, or like we go on musical trips with the choir and stuff. And these towns being smaller, you really have more of an opportunity to letter in a sport. Like this year I'm a freshman, and I ended up lettering in wrestling.
Well, when we first came to Alaska, there was a lot of things that we thought we were going to be able to do up on the Chugach Forest. That's where we first started out, came up from Missoula, Montana. That was about 8 years ago, and it's been a very worthwhile experience, I think, being here in Region 10 and here in Alaska.
That's how one family looks at Alaska. There's another viewpoint, too. Mike Shanta found remote living in the village of Cake more of a challenge than he expected.
All right, I'm a single person out here. Whether you're male or female, you will have trouble. During the winter months, you're mainly confined to the office because there's no place to go on the roads. They're all snowed in. After a while, you start just climbing the walls.
These views are extremes. You may find your responses somewhere in between, but let's take a closer look at Alaska, at the reality and the myth, and try to eliminate some of the surprises. Let's start with the basics. One of these involves Alaska's remote nature. Beulah Bauer noticed the isolation right away.
Well, one of the things I noticed when I first came to Alaska was the fact that it takes a little bit of getting used to, in that the transportation is such that you can't just get into your car and take off and go somewhere. It's kind of an isolated feeling that people should expect, but it passes.
Beulah Bauer's initial feeling of isolation is easy to understand. Even more significant, Alaska is the largest state in the Union, but carries the smallest population. About 400,000 people inhabit a land area slightly less than 1/3 the size of the lower 48. More than half the state's residents live in Anchorage, the largest city. Large areas of the state are left unpopulated. Most cities and towns are small, but well supplied with goods and services. Even so, outside the larger cities, you'll find yourself relying on catalogs and putting up with delays in supplies of perishable goods. Within this great territory are the two largest national forests in the nation, the Chugach in south-central Alaska and the Tongass in southeast Alaska. The southeast is characterized by dense forests of spruce, hemlock, and cedar. Further north, Mount McKinley, the tallest peak in North America, dominates the Anchorage area. Nearby, the vegetation of the Chugach National Forest changes to white and black spruce, birch and aspen as you move inland. The climate is another surprise for newcomers, often pleasant because of its variability and warmth. The mountainous Kenai Peninsula in south-central Alaska is the home of the Chugach National Forest. Here, precipitation and temperatures vary considerably. In Anchorage, the largest urban area and headquarters for the Chugach, the annual rainfall amounts to 13 inches. In winter, the low temperatures frequently fall below zero. Summer highs average about 57 degrees above. On the other hand, Cordova witnesses a coastal climate. Its rainfall is 167 inches, with a winter low of 26 degrees and a summer high of 55. The Alaska Panhandle in the south, setting for the Tongass National Forest, is also witness to a surprising climate. Most newcomers are easily acclimated to the unexpectedly warm winter weather, only to have their breath taken away by Juneau's icy Taku wind. Cold air spills over the mountains and roars through town at speeds over 100 miles per hour. But within a few days, the Taku wind is gone, often replaced by a relatively warm rain. In the Panhandle, it can rain any month of the year, and it usually does. Another surprise for newcomers is the long hours of daylight. In the summer, the sun doesn't set till 11, even though both national forests are far south of the true land of the midnight sun. But in winter, daylight lasts only a few hours. It's natural, when describing Alaska, to use a long parade of superlatives. Biggest, tallest, friendliest, and so forth. Well, maybe you should add one more. Expensive.
And that would be $56.33.
Sandra Wilson gave us an idea of the problem.
Cost of living here has been quite high compared to what we were used to down south. In the areas of housing and utilities, in some instances, the 25% of the cost of living that we receive up here has helped, but our housing personally has tripled almost to what it was down south. Utilities are again high. Electricity here is extremely high. Most of us use coal oil to heat our wood.
Costs are different in other communities, but you can be certain that wherever you go, they will be high. To help offset these costs, a federal cost of living allowance is granted each employee. The allowance ranges from 20% at Anchorage to 25% elsewhere. It's a big help, but not the total solution. And James Bradley felt the pinch.
One thing I have noticed is that the prices are quite a bit higher than they are in the lower 48. This can be discouraging, but if you look around, I think even there you might be able to find some bargains as far as Alaskans are concerned. I'm still not quite used to the prices here, so I can't really say.
And I thank you very much, and we'll see you again next trip.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Let's consider your biggest investment, housing and utilities. Probably no other segment of the Alaskan economy is as volatile and unpredictable as housing. Conditions and prices can change daily. The smaller the community, the more scarce and higher priced the housing. Rentals are difficult, if not impossible, to find in small villages. Trailer spaces may be hard to find. And while some government housing is available, it's also scarce. Even land can be hard to find. There is a myth that Alaskan land is easy to acquire and available at a low cost. But federal lands no longer allow homesteading, and state lands are available only by an occasional competitive auction. It's possible to purchase land from private individuals, but prices have escalated tremendously in the past few years. The state of Alaska provides a limited number of relatively low-interest housing loans to assist residents and newcomers. Once you get established, your children will find well-equipped schools. And well-trained teachers in most villages and communities.
Teacher, then he looked at his desk again. Okay, let's have her stop right there.
Just the same, remember that Alaska's population is small, And like many communities in the lower 48, a small tax base often sets the limit for community services. Medical and dental services are available. Most areas have doctors and small hospitals. Smaller villages have public health nurses and paramedics. But there are not enough doctors in Alaska, and trips to Seattle and further south for medical and dental work are common for patients. While some people are traveling south, communication technology is traveling north. Only a few years ago, television was a novelty in Alaska. Now, Alaska is a leader in television technology, with more and more villages receiving line programming by satellite. The 80s are expected to see Alaska fully covered with live television coverage. For a newcomer in one of those distant villages, that first day of live programming becomes a major event. Sometimes it brings a real surprise.
They do have TV here in Cake. Well, mainly it was a 3-week delayed from Anchorage. And what we were doing is, well, I went out to the junkyard and found an old TV and fixed it up. And last Friday, as we were watching it, right in the middle of a movie, the screen went blank and good old Walter Cronkite came on and started in with the evening news.
Because Alaska is so far removed, television and radio provide an all-important link to the lower 48. Something else that can occupy your time is doing your own auto and home maintenance and repairs.
It's just a big hassle. You just got to keep, a lot of times like this winter, I needed parts to fix the house. All the pipes froze and busted. Called 4 times, 4 days in a row to get parts out. Nobody sent anything.
If you decide to come to Alaska, you'll need to make careful plans for the move. Your personnel office can help, but make sure they contact Region 10 for advice on the special transfer requirements. Travel regulations are slightly different in Alaska. But regardless of the difference, you do need to plan your actual move. Consider transportation. There are no through roads to southeast Alaska, and only one gravel road to the interior from the outside. Most Alaskans either travel aboard the state ferry system or fly. Reservations must be made well in advance for both. Up to now, you are probably convinced that you're being transferred to Timbuktu or to somewhat of a foreign country. Well, you're not far from right. Alaska is a faraway land, and it is different. Even getting to work is different. You don't just drive to work. You'll fly a lot, or travel by boat, like Johnny Wilson.
About the only place I drive around here is maybe to the office once in a while and out to the end of the road. Most of the places that you go to work either go by boat or airplane. And this could be a small work boat, anywhere from a 16 to a 24-foot boat, then up to our 50-foot Ranger work boats that the Forest Service owns.
Getting to and from the job is a problem, but there is a partial solution. Working 10 days in the field and having 4 days off at home. It's called a 10-day field work trip. While it helps the travel situation, it also affects family. And if you have a family, it may require some adjustments. John and Sandra Wilson made the adjustment, but they understand the problems.
One of the things that's different from most places in the lower 48 and working with the Forest Service is 5- and 10-day work trips that you do here in Alaska. First 3 months we were here, I was on 5-day work trips, and the only time I was home on weekend. And a couple of weeks of that was really enough for me. I enjoy being at home at night, and I like to be at home every night when I can. How did you feel about those trips, Sandra?
Well, I didn't enjoy the trips. I thought it was really hard to try to handle different situations sometimes at home, even though you know you can. It's easier a lot of times to have your husband to consult, and if anything major did come up, then you're pretty much on your own, and it does get kind of lonely.
Region 10 is sensitive to the difficulty of extended separations on family life. Recently, provisions have been made to include the family on field trips that last over 3 weeks. In a nutshell, we've glanced at the country and living conditions through the eyes of a few people who live there. But there's another side to the employment picture. Your opportunities for advancement.
When we decided to come to Alaska,
Joan Goodland in Anchorage tells us about women's opportunities.
The long night, the isolation. But the surprising thing is that I found that it just isn't that bad. One of the most unusual aspects of Alaska to me is that there are so many women in executive positions. One of the first things that we did when we came here was to start arranging for a real estate loan, and we had an appointment with the vice president of the bank, and it turned out to be a female.
In Sitka, 700 miles to the southeast, Elaine Sunday found something similar.
There are quite a few women in Region 10 that I think are getting the same kind of experience. When I came up 3 years ago, I know on the Chatham area of the Tongass, we had very few women in the field. When I got to Sitka, we had one woman at a GS-11 level. She was the administrative officer. We didn't have any women in field jobs. 3 years later, and there are a number. In fact, just a few weeks ago, for the first time, I was out on a trip to one of the villages, and there were more women than men in the group. So I don't see it as becoming anything but better for women up here.
Job opportunities are good, whether you're male or female. And because the population is small, so is the trained labor pool. The region's emphasis is on filling the job with the best available people. And that attitude isn't confined to the Forest Service. In the larger towns, your spouse will also find excellent employment opportunities. In the smaller communities, jobs are available, but largely confined to clerical or even manual labor. This can be a serious frustration to a spouse who is a highly skilled professional. What about long-term career opportunities in the Forest Service? Fred Harnish is qualified to answer that.
You might lose out somewhat about what the Forest Service is doing down below. I know a lot of people are saying, well, your career is going to be shot if you come up here, and that's a bunch of garbage as far as I'm concerned, because if a person comes up here with a positive attitude and stays and tries to change the organization and enjoys the outdoors and gets out and utilizes it no matter what the weather's like, you don't sacrifice anything with your career. In fact, you learn a lot of things up here you'll never learn in the lower 48.
And Fred should know, he's built a lot of his career in Alaska. And with the recent return to ranger districts, your career plans can actually be furthered by an Alaskan tour. Enough about work.
When considerably duties to be done, a policeman's lot is not a handy one.
A balanced diet of work and play is necessary for survival in Alaska. And recreation plays a major role in family life. In most of the larger communities, some Alaskans take part in choral groups, symphonies, and theater groups. Outdoor recreation is one of the attractive features of life in Alaska. You'll find that Alaskan recreation is a family affair. But some types of recreation are expensive, often becoming a considerable investment to reach the best hunting and fishing areas. Boating and fishing are popular activities. But don't get into an argument with other fishermen. There's plenty for everyone. Most cheechakos become hooked on catching Alaskan king salmon and the giant king crab. The largest salmon in the world have been caught in Alaskan waters by sport fishermen.
What do we got to do this weekend? You want to go after abalone or?
Well, the salmon derby's coming up.
Oh, that's right, salmon derby's coming. That isn't too far away.
Yeah.
The kings are starting to come in. We've already got our herring all set.
Yeah.
I think we're out of halibut too, aren't we? We had some moose in the freezer, and what, Bob and I, we got, what, 5 deer last year?
Yeah.
But the biggest surprise for the newcomer is Alaska's unbroken panorama of scenic beauty. In many places, narrow fjords divide the steep forested slopes of rugged mountains, their peaks hugged by rain-laden clouds for a good part of the year. These dense rainforests and thousands of wooded islands separate coastal towns. Broad glaciers creep through valleys, and a few even reach the sea to calve huge blocks of turquoise blue ice. Alaska. Big and bold. But Alaska is what you make it. It's a wild country, partly tamed and waiting for the right kind of people. People who can accept the challenge and make it a home.
Well, I got the opportunity to come to Ketchikan, and I didn't think about it for 10 seconds. I said, sure, I'll be right up there. Had everything packed. And when I arrived, it was somewhat typical of a fall day in Ketchikan. It was blowing about 40 knots, and it was raining. But when I got off the ferry, I felt like I came home. That was the most comfortable feeling of any place I've ever been at, since and before.
Fred Harnish, Sandra Wilson, Mike Shanta, and others found their work challenging and rewarding. Like them, you'll have an excellent chance to put your ideas to work in a young country. You'll carry out the management standards and policies that guide the work of Alaska's national forests. And you may even become an Alaskan, making the transition from Cheechako to sourdough.
Well, even with all the problems here that I've had since I got here in November, I still like the area. It's a good place to be. Sure as hell beats Detroit.
The 25% increase that we receive here makes up for some of the difference.
The most frustrating thing up here right now is, like anywhere else, is the paperwork.
I would say that the opportunities for women in Alaska are very good.
I can't remember really any complaints about the school system.
First of all, I've never seen any igloos since I've been here.